Welcome everybody into the Valley. I am Ethan Shutt, joined by Ryan and Philip. And guys, welcome to the NBA Finals. I don't have any cutesy opening. I don't have any fun let's play some cool clips from early in the season. And no, I just don't like the Suns are in the NBA Finals, guys. And I am so happy. I am emotionally and mentally still fatigued. I believe that's the best word possible. I am blessed to have an understanding boss who texted me last night at 11:30. He's like, "You're not going to get much done tomorrow, are you?" And I said, no, I'm not, but I'm going to try really hard.
I wish I had that.
No, it's amazing. And because of that, I am knowingly not exactly the most eloquent right now. My thoughts are just a blur of emotions and words and happiness all together. But wanted to go ahead and start by saying, if you are listening for the first time, if you're here with us on the YouTube channel, for those listening, we do a video version of this that gets posted next day on YouTube as well. If you're here for the first time, welcome. Hello. It is nice to have you. We got incredibly lucky to start this season. Been a Suns fan for a very long time. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the three of us tried another NBA podcast in the past, didn't quite have the passion to keep it going. Talking Phoenix Suns was, for me, as easy as breathing. And so it was a really nice way. I was like, I know we can do this. Ryan's been cheering on the Suns with me for a while. Philip started, I believe, in episode 1 as just the NBA fan, the basketball fan, who wanted to have a different view and approach, a little less bias. 2 episodes ago, we dubbed him an official Suns fan. He's officially in. He's got his first bit of merch on the way. Valley Oop shirt in the mail. We have been on an incredibly fun ride since February. This is episode 20. And again, just want to say thanks for those that are listening, have been listening. Say hi on Twitter, in the YouTube comments, what have you. Philip, I'm going to turn this one over to you, brother. I'm just going to be here. I'll be smiling. If you need me to talk, I'll be here. But for those watching on YouTube, you can just look at a really happy guy up here in the top corner. Take it away.
All right. So I guess the question is for the two big Suns fans. Do you want to start with a recap of the series, or do you want to process all the emotions that you're feeling right now?
Oh, man. Ryan watched me try to process the emotions last night. Ryan,
I was like taking in the celebration. You know, Rachel Nichols was interviewing Chris Paul, and from behind me at the island in our kitchen area, all I hear is, and you can tell he was like trying to hold it together.
I moved back. I left the couch.
But all you heard was those tiny like little rabbit sniffles. You're like, oh man, this is it.
Well, I'll take the process approach here and walk you through what was going on in my mind. So I'm sitting on the couch last night, rocking the, I think 2004 Suns Steve Nash jersey, an exact replica of the first basketball jersey I ever owned, which is still hanging up in my childhood bedroom, which was a youth medium, youth large, which you're like, wow, he must have been small. I do want to give context. I was only 5'1" going into high school. But the thought is still there. Man, I had loving parents who made me go to bed at a reasonable time. And so I listened to Suns games on the radio with my new iTouch. I would record every game on TV on the VCR in my bedroom. I still have VHS recordings of old Suns Lakers playoff games, Suns Spurs playoff games. And I list those two teams because I also experienced so much heartbreak as a young sports fan. I think my dad wanted Ryan and I to just be accustomed to cheering for teams that'll break our hearts. The poor guy was a Red Sox fan his entire upbringing, which the majority of that was before the curse was broken. So he cheered for a team that never won anything in his lifetime. He was a Vikings fan who, again, I think made it to 4 Super Bowls, never won one. So it was like he wanted to pass on the, hey, enjoy this heartbreak, kid. And so for some dumb reason, I saddled up to the Suns when I was 9 or 10. I think a big part of it was I was the short, scrawny white guy in the gym that couldn't shoot or score. So I said, hey, that Steve Nash guy, everyone loves him for passing and getting assists. I can do that. And what turned into a love of Steve Nash turned into a love of the Suns. And so it's been 16 to 17 years waiting for last night to happen. And it felt so good. The only other time I can ever remember getting emotional, I would say, in an event to that level would have been when the Red Sox won their first World Series, which was back in 04. Another one of those things where my team in my mind can never do the right thing. They're destined to fail. Every good break, you just assume something bad's going to happen. And so last night was, is cathartic the right word? It just felt like all of these, I don't know. I saw so much on Suns Twitter of everyone just waiting for Suns basketball to happen, which to the commoner means every bad thing in the world to happen. Your player gets ejected for stepping 1 foot over the line, which I witnessed as a kid. Your player gets checked into the boards as if it were hockey and breaks half his face. Insert every bad thing growing up, and then the entire tenure of just cheering on an awful team. And Ryan knows this because I suckered him into cheering with me. I was a poor high school and college kid who would buy league pass to watch my team win 20 games in an entire season. My college roommates have been texting me a lot because they would go to bed and I would stay up to watch every single game.
On the East Coast, mind
Oh,
you.
I mean, I'm living in Florida at this time, and I am staying up incredibly late to watch my team get beat by 30. Spent money to go watch them play at home against the Spurs, to watch them put up the worst first half in franchise history. They were down by like 39 to the Spurs. I kept doing these things. I think it's insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And for the first time, I don't feel insane because I got that different result, and I'm just really going to enjoy it while I've got it.
So I want to clue in on that moment real quick with you, Ethan, and then Ryan, I'll come to you. There had to be a moment. We didn't text as much last night. I didn't text you guys as much intentionally as I do during games because I figured nerves would be up quite a bit and I didn't want to add to that in any way. But I'm assuming there was a moment last night when it hit you for the first time and you were like, they got it. I sent the Seth Davis Sharpie text to you guys. Ethan, when was that moment for you specifically last night?
So this is going to sound like a lie, but it is 100% true. I don't know if you guys watched any of the post-game interviews. The Suns posted on YouTube the full hour of all of them from last night. And Jay Crowder kept making these comments to Chris Paul as they were running away. Like, can you taste it? Can you smell it? Whatever. Like, it's coming. Do you get it? And Chris Paul every time was like, nah, man, not yet, not yet, not yet. Because he didn't want to mentally put himself in that space until it was a done deal. And this sounds crazy. They were up 27 or some crap like that. I think there was like 2 minutes and 45 seconds left when Ty Lue pulled Paul George out. And that was the moment where I think Ryan started hearing sniffles. Because in my mind, I have been programmed to assume the worst will happen. Something bad's going to happen. And game 5 really screwed with me. I definitely had too much confidence going into that game. I thought they were going to take care of business at home. And when that loss happened, I was like, oh, crap. Don't be the 3-1 Warriors. Don't be the 3-1 Warriors. Like, what a perfect Suns basketball thing to happen, to manage to go down in history as the other team that this happened to, right? And so the moment Paul George got taken off the court and they started applauding and hugging, I was like, oh, crap. Like, this is for real. Like, it's done. And it was – I don't think any of the last 2:30. I know Sticks had a dunk. Shout out to him. I think Bulldog Carter hit a jumper. Like, I'm glad the reserves got their buckets to say, hey, I was there in the game, put me in the box score. But no, I couldn't believe it. And my phone started blowing up with texts and calls and tweets. Because again, when you're the one fan that everyone knows who cheers for an awful team, they're going to remember that. So I think I had every roommate from college texted me. People were tweeting me who I hadn't talked to, dudes from high school. It was great. it was a cool moment to feel like all of those awful hours and way more than hours of your life dedicated to something that you have no real financial interest in. You have no real ownership of it except for you care about it. I mean, I'm staring at a wall of nothing but Suns art in front of me where I'm like, wow, I spent a lot of time and money and effort into this thing. I'm glad it's finally happening. And you don't know if it's ever going to happen again. Don't want to be negative Nancy here, but a lot of things have gone the right way. That is a very unsuns thing to happen. So literally as we're recording, I just get a text from my dad that says how happy he is for us. So again, that was it. I mean, it took till Paul George left the court for me to finally be like, all right, cool. This is done now.
Mine was actually much earlier. And I remember it because I leaned over to Ethan and I said, this is the time. Paul George shakes Chris Paul with like 7 or 8 minutes left and hits a big shot to cut it to 7. Chris Paul comes down, takes Reggie and ISO, hits the 3 in his grill.
And one.
And gets the and one. And I turned to Ethan, I said, Chris smells blood. And then I tweeted, Chris Paul smells blood in the water. This is his moment. And from that moment, he hit another gear. And it was Chris Paul versus the Clippers. And we closed it out. And it was kind of surreal because to Ethan's point, we've kind of been gambling on losers in all of our fandoms for a really long time. So you kind of just know what to expect with all of your teams to the point where I think it was at the beginning of the season, somebody's like, all right, you've got Chris Paul, you've got Jay Crowder. What is your best case scenario? And I said a Western Conference Finals loss, and I would be completely satisfied. I'd be over the moon. Yeah, and then Chris Paul hit that and one, and I knew it was done. There was just something in me where that shot went in, he saw it go in, and you could just tell. Because that's when Boogie started getting irritated. That's when Beverly started getting irritated. Paul George started to try to play a little hero ball, and Chris Paul was just in control. And I was like, this is it. We're going to the finals. It's done. Wrap it up, put a bow on it, get the Sharpies out, because it's Suns in the finals.
So for such a close game too, what's crazy is the Clippers' biggest lead was 1. The Clippers never led by more than 1 point, and I felt like that game was giving me a heart attack for, again, felt like 46 minutes. And it wasn't the case. Like they had run away with it, and I was just, it felt awful. In the moment it was done, I love my sweet wife. She was she asked a question, and I just shushed her in the most loving way possible because I wanted to hear every word from Rachel Nichols, who has hated on the Suns for quite some time, and I wanted to hear every word that Chris Paul had to say. I wanted to soak it all in. And again, this morning I watched the full media interviews. I watched everything. I am just going to enjoy this so much because it's wonderful and it makes me really happy.
And there seems to be a beautiful chemistry to it. It's poetic that Chris Paul is the one who had the game last night. Like last night is the Chris Paul game, because a lot of what you're describing of heartaches and near misses paired with not great teams and having to wait for this opportunity for so long is in part with differences. His career. That's the Chris Paul story. Having good, not really great teams in New Orleans, having a couple great teams wrecked by bad luck in LA, having just a really feel good story last year, even with the Thunder, yet coming up just a little bit short in Game 7. There are echoes of the last decade or so of the Phoenix Suns in the story of Chris Paul's career when you take out those specifics. So I'm sure it's additionally sweet for Suns fans to watch a guy who's going through very similar emotions turn and look at Rachel Nichols and just say, I just want to be with my teammates right now so I can experience this joy and elation and relief that I'm hearing from the two of you as well.
No, that moment for me, like how Chris Paul handled that was how I felt as if I was there. I'm like, dude, just go enjoy it. Like no dumb questions right now. He doesn't want to give you this nonsense. And to your point, the mirroring or the parallelism between his career I mean, think of the Rockets team that, barring his own injury, should have been in the finals. And the Suns in the 7 seconds or less days, had a lot of teams that should have been in the finals. It's absurd that none of them made it. And even with you talking about the Thunder last year, this weird surprise of like outperforming expectations, but it's still not being enough, made me think of the 2013-14 Suns team that finished 48-34 and didn't make the playoffs. The bubble not making the playoffs didn't hurt me that bad, because you can go into it all you want. I didn't feel like the team genuinely deserved a playoff spot, given there was weird arbitrary cutoff of who's in, who's not. You do what you can. Players are being rested. It felt weird. I was happy, but it felt weird. But the 2013-14 team, it was going down to the last 2 games of the season with the Mavs and one other competing for that 8th spot. And when your team goes 14 games above 500 and doesn't make the playoffs, you just have this gut feeling of like, what else? Like, what else can you do? And that, really going into the whole history here, that 1 year screwed the Suns over in such a weird way, because that team should have been bad. They should have been tanking. The whole rebuild, the reset should have started. And so even when the Suns were supposed to be bad, they were good, but not good enough. And then when they're bad and get their big picks and they should be good, they have a 21-win season. And it's just so much compiling on top of each other. It's like the Suns can't be bad correctly. They can't be good correctly. And so to finally see it all pieced together feels so good. And because the Suns are a team that have just been crapped on for so long in the media Draymond was telling Booker to leave Phoenix not even a year ago, right? I mean, what a joke. And it's awesome. And Chris Paul has got to feel similarly. I don't know who pulled it up, but a Sporting News tweet, and it was actually a Shams quote saying, and this is June of 19, so just about 2 years ago, right before the Thunder situation, there's not a team in the league right now that is willing to trade for Chris Paul. Even teams that they've called, I'm told, as just a salary dump, say, basically, we'll give you Chris Paul for free, and the teams respond with, no, we're good. That was 2 years ago. And so when you hear him talking in that post-game interview about all the doubt and the disbelief, if you're detached from him in his career, it's easy to be like, what crap is he talking about? He's all defense. He's all pro. He's an all-star all the time, point guard, number whatever. And you forget that 2 years ago, what happened going into Oklahoma City was so unheard of. And so, I mean, how crazy is it that the team that gets into the finals is this one, right? I mean, it makes no sense at all.
Well, and I love he did it the hard way, and that's always been Chris Paul, is he's willing to put in the work. He didn't go to a super team, and I mean, he may have tried to a couple of times early on in his career, but who does he pick when he has an option? He comes to the Suns. He says, I see Devin Booker, I see Ayton, I see what they've got there. That's where I want to try and give my last few good seasons and my last push. It would be so easy for him to go ring chase somewhere. And the fact that he put in the work, he fought through injury, he somehow gets COVID and comes back. Like so many things where the bottom should have fallen off of this thing this postseason. And there he is talking to Rachel Nichols, and he's like, nah, let's go party. And I think we see it in the way the fans reacted. Everybody's been making fun of the Suns for meeting them at the airport and celebrating and acting like the Suns haven't when you've had 28 years from a finals appearance, you're just appreciating the moment. And you see it in the way the fans are treating these players, from Chris Paul to guys like Javon Carter and Torrey Craig, who are just role players, and saying, we've got mad love for what you've done for this city and for this team. I love it. It's the best, man.
I have 3, and I'll make them real quick, and then I'll turn it back to you. 3 things that popped in my head talking with what Ryan was saying, and I made myself think of it. So, number 1, what I loved about what Ryan just said about how much the Suns fans appreciate every single player down to the bench mob is the bench mob and the reserves are one of the things that have made this team so successful. And one of the comments that the analysts love to bring up is every single player knows their role and they do it well. And that is, I mean, when you want to talk about dealing with egos and pride and everything that comes with being a professional athlete, this team is so well constructed. Props to Monty and James Jones. Still not sure if I can ever give props to Robert Sarver, but I guess we're getting there. The second one that popped in my mind is when Chris Paul was explaining why he wanted to come to the Suns, and I believe the quote was something to the extent of that light-skinned guy over there. What made me laugh, again, the big picture, and going back to Ryan's comment about trying to join a super team, 2010 or 2011, Chris Paul tried to go play with Kobe Bryant.
Yep.
And the league, through whatever fishy means, decided that would not happen. And it's incredibly funny that 10 years later, he chooses to go play with the player that is, I mean, as big of a Kobe Bryant fan as you can imagine, imitates everything through this guy, has his words tatted on his arm. Just, again, the perfection of the story for Chris Paul, to where 10 years later, he finally got what he wanted playing with a guy like that. But now it's in a situation where he can be that mentor and that role model for him. And I don't know how impressive it is because you can't quantify it. But the fact that so many young guys all took a big step up the moment that Chris Paul showed up is not a fluke. And that's my last thing. We talked about in the bubble how impressive it was, how many of the young guys seemed to start getting it. And it was almost this college camaraderie, throw them all in a dorm together, and they find out that they're more than just teammates. As corny as that sounds like every Hallmark movie. But that's what happened in the bubble. All these young guys figured out, like, we like each other. We're going to play for each other. And they came up just short. And you take those guys who want to be together, want to play together, and you put this guy in who's got it figured out and can elevate everyone's game. And this makes sense. People who haven't watched the Suns all year long are, how are they a 2 seed? This is crazy. What a joke of a playoff run. Blah, blah, blah. Everything's going their way. And it's like, did you not watch the regular season? They struggled at first. They worked it out. They figured it out. And then they've been on a tear. So, no, I'm not surprised that they're in the finals. My Suns fan internally is shocked, just the fact that they made it past round one. But it makes sense. And Chris Paul and Monty Williams and James Jones, so many good character building, winning is most important, team-oriented dudes. The 3 pieces that kind of have been leading this the whole way. It's awesome to see all of them get rewarded. James Jones taking a team to the championship, a player who was known as like the guy that's on every championship team, but what does he do? Showing that obviously he knows what's going on. Monty Williams, who's been through more than we could ever imagine, does things the right way. Man of faith that just continues to seem like he gets how to treat people, and so they treat him back. And then Chris Paul, I mean, everything he's gone through. There were just so many good stories that all came to a wonderful conclusion last night, but they kept reminding the people at home that this isn't a conclusion and they're not done. And I loved that focus of this is great, but we're not done. That got me a little bit excited as a fan, I will say.
All right, Ryan, what other thoughts do you have before we get into some basketball nerdiness?
Just the fact that, again, the appreciation that we have as a collective unit, as Suns fans, for the moment is nothing to be ashamed of. And it's so fun to just enjoy things that are good. And if you're a Suns fan, this is just a good moment, and enjoy it to your heart's content, because the stress is coming in a few days, but we've got a week where we can just sit back, relax, and know that odds are we're probably the favorite in the NBA Finals come a week from now.
Oh, I mean, it's not a probably. I think right now, 538 or whatever.
We're minus 210.
Well, I would say Vegas is minus 210. Is it 538 that does the odds? That website, right? I think right now the Suns are the 71% chance of winning the finals, which is just absurd. And while this is going on, we're monitoring what's going on in the East. That series is tied 2-2. The Bucks without Giannis are currently winning by 14 in the third quarter against the Hawks team without Trae Young. Lot going on there. This might be weird. I hope that whoever comes out of that series is healthy, just for the sake of I want to win it the right way. But yeah, it's crazy, man. The Suns are favored to win the finals with home court advantage.
Weird. Yeah, And I think we could keep going and recounting specific memories of
Brooke heard them all last night. That poor woman did not get to sleep because I was amped. And I said, baby, I'm good to go to bed with you, but I'm going to be talking about the Suns for a while. I did not fall asleep till about 4:30. She gave up on me around 1 o'clock, and that was okay. She put in her time for sure.
Yeah. So there's more to discuss and more emotions to talk about. But to YouTube viewers right now, what I would encourage you to do is drop a comment below if you are a Suns fan, and especially if you're a longtime Suns fan, just a couple questions that you might share with us. What is your earliest memory of being a Suns fan? Speaking of the catharsis of this moment, what is your biggest heartbreak as a Suns fan? And then describe the moment last night when you realized that the Suns were Western Conference champs. Drop a comment below and we'll read and respond to those. And before we get out of here, I just wanted to go through a couple of the more nerdy parts of the game in the series that I thought were really good from the Suns. And Ryan and Ethan, feel free to hop in whenever you have a comment through this. One of the things that stood out in this series is that Monty continues to press the right buttons. And during this series and during the last two games in this series, that was incredibly hard to do. DeAndre Ayton faced an almost impossible challenge the last two games of this series when the Clippers were forced into going small. DA has been absolutely outstanding. He has been marvelous. He has been everything you want in playing and defending and attacking other teams' bigs. And I don't think we can communicate enough how challenging it is to go from guarding and attacking fives to guarding and attacking a small ball lineup. His defensive energy has to come up. His space on the offensive end is shrunk, and that is so difficult. But then to get back to Monty, there were times throughout the series where the Suns were intentionally saving DA's legs by making him not rotate. If you go back and you watch some of the Suns' defensive possessions, one of the things that they would do is when the Clippers would drive and kick, usually that means DA has to get on his horse and go somewhere else. They were bringing guys all the way across the court from the weak side to make sure that DA could stay in and around the paint. And that's huge, even if you just do it for a few minutes at a time, because it's saving his legs. He had several games where he had to play more than 40 minutes, and Monty looked for ways on the defensive end to not only keep him in the paint to block drives and to prevent straight line drives to the basket, but also to put him in better rebounding position, which simultaneously saved some energy. And I think that was huge. That was absolutely huge throughout the series, because I think last night you could see that Paul George and several of the Clippers were absolutely gassed. Paul George was burning the Suns on ball defense last night throughout the series. And last night he just didn't have the legs. His first step was markedly slower last night. He wasn't beating them as easily, and that made life harder on all of the Clippers. And I think Monty did a great job saving DA as much as he could, even after the Clippers went small. Ethan, what you got about that?
Yeah, and they talked about it in the broadcast a lot, that Paul George was leading the playoffs in minutes, and it wasn't by a small margin. And second was Booker, who I think was like 100 minutes behind. So Paul George has put almost 2 entire no-break games on his legs throughout the last few weeks. And we've talked about this too, the way the schedule was set up. If your series went long, you weren't really going to be rewarded with much rest. And so, yeah, the way Monty was able to do that was so impressive. And one other thing, it doesn't count as like your nerdy basketball adjustment, but it is something that stood out to me. Monty took away Torrey Craig's minutes. And there was a lot of information on that and kind of people analyzing why that might have been. And a lot of the times it was because Torrey wasn't providing enough on the offensive end to keep the offense moving. And so Monty took those minutes away. Dooley got some of them. Cam Johnson was getting increased minutes and doing fantastic with them. But what's so impressive to me is that after Craig was gone, there was a glaring hole in terms of energy and rebounding within the Suns. And maybe I'm making too much out of this. I feel like it would be so hard to be a professional coach and to admit you're wrong by changing again. He doesn't have to go to the press conference and explain everything he's doing. That's never going to happen. But the fact that they said, you know what, that wasn't it. What we did wasn't the right move. Let's change it again. And some of it might have to be with Zubac going out, but still giving Craig those minutes back was such an impressive thing for me to watch. Because again, he's what, like 7th or 8th in the rotation. And so losing those minutes, doesn't seem like a big deal, but goodness gracious, what an absolute monster last night.
Credit where credit's due for him being ready when his name was called. I don't have the stat in front of me. I want to say he was plus 28 with 3 points.
He was plus 28 with 3 points.
With 3 points, he was plus 28 on the floor. That's insane.
And he had 8 rebounds last night as well, which is massive. It was 4 offensive and 4 defensive. And if you watched in game 5, the Lakers already dispatched
Same
them,
thing.
right?
Oops.
Yeah. The Clippers were fantastic at team rebounding, especially when they were on defense. You would see 4 bodies around Ayton, making it really difficult for him to have a significant impact on the offensive end. And when you bring in a guy like Torrey, who's just going to fly, and we've talked about it, just get those rebounds and make you go,
Mm-hmm.
that simultaneously makes him more of a threat to come in, get an offensive rebound, and kick it out for 3, which is one of the best offensive plays you can have in basketball. But it also makes Ayton more effective because now they're worried about DA and they're worried about Torrey coming from the weak side. The last thing I'll say that I really liked and I thought was really interesting by way of adjustments was, and it didn't happen a ton, but Booker is decoy. There were a couple times early in the series when Cam was cooking, when CP was having a good little run, where the Clippers were bent on not allowing Devin Booker to get the ball. And there were times where
the Valley-oop itself was an example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Watching how they wouldn't shift because they were so scared of what Booker could do.
Yeah, and in half-court sets, there were times when Chris Paul was on his run last night, Booker's literally standing in the corner by half-court.
Talk to the
Which, in basketball, playing 5-on-5 defense in the half-court is hard enough. Playing 4-on-4 defense in the half court is significantly harder. And Booker just content to let a teammate do his thing, which is a huge shout out to him for being willing to do that and not demanding the ball be in his hands. And then to Monty and James Jones for the culture that they've created, where your best, probably most dynamic player is content to literally go stand by half court and watch a teammate close out the games. And there are more things to discuss, because Ethan, I think, mentioned it, and Ryan, I know, has mentioned it via text and stuff. It's almost unbelievable what the Suns have been able to pull off. But watching it, it makes basketball sense. This is a supremely impressive team on offense and defense. And when you have nights like we had from Chris Paul last night, where he just goes off, or Booker in the last 2 closeout games against the Nuggets and the Lakers, this is a team that at times is nearly, if not completely, impossible to beat. So I'm going to kick it to Ethan, Ryan. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
I would say, what you got, Ryan? I've got a couple things before we close, so I'll let you take this.
I've got nothing, man. I'm very happy. I'm happy. It's been a hard year for a lot of people. It's been a hard year for our family, and this has been such a highlight this season. To have this has just been a joy.
My favorite stats that I've compiled. Number 1, DeAndre Ayton, the fastest number 1 overall pick to the final since Kenyon Martin in 2002.
DA!
Only took him 3.
Never doubted him.
LeBron, Dwight, and Kyrie with 4 closely behind. The fact that the Suns had a winning percentage of .302 over the last 5 seasons before going into this one. The worst in any major sport history before going to the finals. Chris Paul's 41 points and 0 turnovers in Game 6 joined 3 other players to do that in the conference finals. Jordan, Shaq, and Hakeem, all of which went on to win Finals MVP. Chris Paul gets to play his first NBA Finals game in his 1,214th game, second latest ever. And then Monty Williams is my favorite coach ever. There's no statistical basis for that one. I just wanted to throw it in there. Guys, we're going to get together again as soon as we find out who will be playing in the final. Probably going to have 1 or 2 episodes breaking that down, really getting into it as much as we can. But for Philip and Ryan, I'm Ethan Shutt. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. This is Into the Valley of Phoenix Suns podcast.
We out.
We out.